This is your host, Dorothy Shelton. Jeff Olson experienced the worst kind of hell any man can imagine when he lost half his family in a car accident. In his near-death account, he shares his experience of going home to the other side, a natural way of being that is so familiar, it is hard to understand how he could have ever forgotten. His testimony serves as a reminder to us all of where we come from and the power of choice in our lives.
Perhaps at the end of my hospital stay was the most profound thing. Now, this is after ICU and after surgical recovery and both the back and forth and out of the hospital room, and I was actually in the rehabilitation wing. And they had amputated my leg above the knee. My right leg was in a brace sticking straight out because they had attempted to repair that knee. This arm was in a sling because they'd attempted to repair the shoulder, and they were doing shock therapy, trying to get the nerves to regenerate into the muscles. And they had finally repaired my abdomen because there was so much infection. And Spencer, my 7-year-old, had been staying with my younger brother and his wife, and he would come see me in the hospital. And I knew he was grieving. Even with these out-of-body experiences, the grief was so intense. At the end of this hospital stay, as I'm in that state, I went to sleep one night, and I fell into a peaceful, deep sleep. And in fact, I was aware, wow, I'm sleeping. And I felt that light come again. The same light that came at the scene of the accident. This light came because I was grieving so miserably. And it comforted me. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light, it dispensed, it went away. It cleared like fog off a lake. And I was in the most gorgeous, beautiful place. And, you know, people speak of heaven or the other side or the spirit world. There's all kinds of different words that we equate to this. The only word that comes close to what I experienced is I was home. I was home. It was so welcoming. It was so familiar. I was home. And I began to run. No, I don't run in this life, even now, but I was running. The experience was so physical. I mean, I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and my toes and my thighs as I ran. I mean, it was whatever we experience in this realm as far as physical, it was accentuated there. Everything was alive. Every part of me was alive. Everything around me was alive. It was the most invigorating physical experience. It was a sensual experience. There really aren't words to describe what I was experiencing, and I was so joyful and happy, and to be running and to be whole. I kept thinking, I'm whole, I'm healed. And then I got this knowing again, this feeling, this inspiration. I knew I wasn't there to stay. I knew I would have to come back. And at that same time, there was this corridor off to the left, and I thought, oh, intuitively, I'm to go this way. And I began working my way down the corridor. And as I did, I saw at the end of the corridor was a crib. My little boy, Griffin, he was only 14 months old. He had been sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident. He was a toddler. And I saw this crib, and I raced to the crib. I looked in it, and there was my little boy. There was Griffin sleeping as beautifully as when I glanced in that rearview mirror on the drive. I mean, and again, I noticed the details, his hands, his eyelashes. And of course, as a father, I just whisked him up and picked him up in my arms. I could feel him solid against me, and I could feel him breathing. I could feel his breath on my neck. And I even leaned over and I smelled his hair. But I'm like, it's really him. I'm really holding my son. And I began to weep. I began to cry, just thinking, how can this be? And yet I was so grateful to be holding him. I had been haunted with all that had happened. And as I held him, I felt this intense presence coming up behind me, gosh, it was so big and so powerful and so overwhelming and so cosmic and wise. And in my upbringing, I grew up in a conservative Christian home. I kept thinking, that's God. That's God, this presence behind me. And I was worried. I was scared. I was shameful. I was holding my little boy thinking, wow, my little boy's here because I crashed the car. My little boy's life was cut short because I lost control, and here comes God. And I kept thinking, I'm in so much trouble. Can I just hold my little boy for a minute? And this presence came closer and closer. And as it came so close, right behind me, I had the thought, I hope in some way I can be forgiven. And when I had that thought, and this felt physical too, these divine arms wrapped around and held me and my little boy, just wrapped right around us. And that's when the lid just came off. When I say that, like there was this download, this outpouring of love, of peace. It's like I'm holding my son and I loved him so dearly. And here comes this presence that I call God, and all of a sudden held me. And it's almost like I became that. We became that. And everything was seen from this higher perspective. All of this is in perfect order. There's nothing to forgive. There was nothing but unconditional love. And I kept thinking, how can that be? And I'm being held by God. And who am I, to be held by God? And there was this communication where, knowing how beloved and how perfect my son was to me, the divine is communicating, yes, that's how we feel about all of you. You're my child, just like the child you hold. And we love you all so dearly. It was a very personal experience. But in me having the personal experience, I knew that rippled out to everyone, every living human soul. And I also realized we're far beyond human. I was like, we're divine. My little boy's divine. I'm being held by the divine. And therefore, all of humanity is divine. We're divine manifestations of that. I thought, who am I to be having this experience? And it came back, I am that I am. And I saw my life. I've learned they call it the life review. I saw my parents' divorce. I saw the insecurities that created in me. I saw my brothers and the role they played in my life. I saw things and I thought, oh, no, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And this beautiful being is communicating, there's no mistakes. What did you learn? What did you learn? And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I did. I learned. And then I'm like, well, but that was wrong. And I knew it was wrong. And I did it anyway. And God communicated and said, well, that's your judgment of it, not ours. We love you. Just like the little boy you hold, you're that precious to us. He was just starting to learn how to walk. And he would fall down and stumble and slobber like toddlers do. And that was the perception I had, was that's how we see you. Yeah, you're down there wandering around and falling down and slobbering on yourself. But to us, you're learning to walk. Look at our children. They're so magnificent. They're so beautiful. I got another little tutorial on choice. Because God said, you can be angry with me your whole life. You can be mad that this happened, that this was allowed to happen. And that's okay. We love you anyway. Or you can beat yourself up your whole life because you were driving the car. I was given another choice. And God said, you can give your son to me. You can trust me and hand him over. And then you won't feel like he was ripped away. You can make a choice and trust and hand him over so that you're giving him to me. He said, I want your will in this. I want you to exercise your will. And I'm like, my will? I mean, given my, conservative Christian upbringing, I'm like, I thought it was your will be done. And what God communicated to me was, your will is our will. That's how much we love you. And our whole intention has always been that you have free will, that you get to choose. That's the whole point of you coming into this life, is that you get to choose and you get to make choices and experience the results of those choices and learn. And there was so much love. There was no judgment whatsoever. There was just this unconditional love. And in all that beauty and all that joy and all that peace, I was able to kiss my little boy. And I handed him over. I gave him back to God. And then I woke up, or came to myself back in the hospital bed, to the amputation and the brace and the sling and all that was going on. And yet I had a little different perspective. It was like, wow, choice, love, eternity. There was my little boy. He was alive and well. In this realm, it felt as if he was dead, but I had held him. I had felt his heartbeat. I had smelled his hair. And Tamara, my wife, had been with me even in the hospital. Both a doctor and a nurse came into the operating room. Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll's actually written about this. He knew there had been a fatality in the accident, but as he came in the operating room, Tamara, my wife, was standing in the air above my body, above the gurney. And he saw her, and she knew he saw her, and she communicated with him. And when we finally talked about this, and I said, what did she say? He said, she simply shared her gratitude over all that we were doing to save your life. And I thought that's exactly what she would say. He didn't know the deal we had made, that I was going to come back and raise our son. But in all this communication, everything connected. And I realized, wow, it's pretty amazing. My brothers were incredible. And I wasn't going home to our house. I was going home to my younger brother's house, where Spencer had been staying with his family. And of course, my brothers came to get me, and they brought me home to my brother's house. And as we pulled up in the driveway, I could see Spencer looking out the window. He's watching, you know. There's his uncles lifting up his dad and putting me in the wheelchair. And I'm obsessed with, how's he going to accept this? How's he ever, here's the colostomy bag. How am I going to explain that? So I began to go up, and he ran out the door, and he ran toward me, and then he ran right past me. I thought, it's too much. It's too much. He can't handle this. The chopped off leg, that's been under the covers. I continued to navigate to the ramp to go in the house. I just looked around as I turned to the electric wheelchair. I looked to see where he went. And Spencer, what an incredible kid. And he's a grown man now. He had run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he was shouting, come out, come see my dad. My dad has made it home. And I did. I cried again. I just thought, look at that. I thought, wow. And he was shouting, come see my dad, come see my dad. No, I didn't want anybody to see me, but he ran around, and then he did throw himself on my lap, which just about killed me, because I still had all the sutures, from the abdominal repair and everything going on. I told him, I said, look, son, I'm going to work very hard to get well, but I'm going to be like this for a while, and I'm going to need your help, and we're going to have to work through this. And are you going to be okay with this, with me like this? What we laugh about is he said to me as a 7-year-old, he said, Dad, if you were nothing but a puddle of blood, I would still love you. And I did. I just burst into tears, and I held him. And here was the epiphany. This is why this was beautiful for me. Suddenly, there I was in my brokenness, in a wheelchair, holding my surviving son. And it was no less divine than being on the other side, holding my son who had passed in the arms of God. Suddenly being in the arms of my surviving son, who was showing me that same unconditional love that the divine had come forward with. Heaven was right here. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to become. There was nothing to do. It was simply to be perfect in that moment. And feel that little boy's love for his dad, and knowing that I had made the choice to come and be his dad, to come back. And heaven was right